All right, we are back with the first episode of 2024 for New York Got Game. On this show, we've already had a heavy focus on the pro teams here in the Big Apple, and we've touched on a bit of some of the college programs. But what we're going to do today is we're going to take it back to my roots, high school basketball. Started a good portion of my career covering high school hoops in the Big Apple, and it was always great to watch the rise of the next generation of New York ballers. So on this episode, we're going to look at why the future of NYC hoops might be happening right now. We've got a great guest to talk about it. So let's get right to it. Over the years, the Big Apple has produced numerous basketball legends, with many of them putting their names on the map, playing in various high school gyms around the city. And when you talk to those who've been around New York City basketball for quite some time, they will mention to you names like Dolph Schayes, Lenny Wilkins, Connie Hawkins, Lou Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Tiny Archibald, Bernard King, Chris Mullin, Mark Jackson, Kenny Anderson, Felipe Lopez, Stephon Marbury, Lance Stevenson, and so many others that I don't have the time to name, even though I just named a whole bunch. But what is the state of NYC high school hoops right now? And who's the next great player to come out of the city that never sleeps? Joining me for some high school basketball talk is a writer for Rivals.com and a site I used to write for, NYCHoops.net, one of the best voices covering high school hoops, the one and only Zach Smart.
Dex, thanks for having me, man. It's great to be here. I really appreciate that. And this place is lovely, beautiful, scenic views, and I can't thank you enough.
I'm glad you liked it, man. I'm glad to have you here in New York Got Game. This is the first episode where we're talking about some high school basketball, because I was telling you we talk a lot about pro and college, but we wanted to get into some high school basketball. So, Zach, I told you this because we chatted a little bit before. My roots as a sports journalist goes back to covering high school hoops here in NYC. Yes. In the previous decade, I remember that there was a lot of talk about the state of NYC high school basketball. And some people, I see your head moving there, some people felt that it wasn't as good as it once was, and the city wasn't producing as many good players as it used to.
You know what's funny about that, Dex?
Yeah.
There was actually an article in which the late and legendary Tom Konchowski, God continue to rest his soul, unbelievable human being and just, tremendous character. He actually even said that New York stopped being the Mecca, and he was telling a story. His memory was elephant-like, and, he was just such a sharp mind. And he was telling a story about how he got off the train somewhere. Remember, he never drove. I don't think the guy ever had a license.
No,
he always took the train everywhere, which makes sense because he was going from game to game, and that was his livelihood. He told me some story about how in the article, it's embedded in the article, he says he got off at a stop and he saw 3 Irish Catholic kids on skateboards, and he goes, they should be working on their jump shots. So I think that, we were probably spoiled in the Kenny Anderson era, Rob Phelps,
right,
and those just prolific scorers. And then obviously Felipe Lopez at Rice High School under Lou DeMello, one of the greatest high school players of all time. And he was kind of like the LeBron James before there was LeBron James. So I think we kind of were given a real reputation, a real stout reputation. I think that reputation might have faltered in a little bit over the years because it's hard to sustain that.
It is, right? And you're right about that reputation. So I got to ask you this, because I love that you mentioned that and the history behind it. But what's your take, as somebody who covers the sport, what's your take on where's the game right now? Is New York returning to prominence? What's the state of NYC high school hoops?
I think right now it is on the upward trajectory to return to prominence when you got Ian Jackson going to North Carolina, Boogie Fland going to Kentucky, Elijah Moore going to Syracuse. You have a wealth of talent all across the 5 boroughs. Staten Island is coming back with a lot of talent. So I think that it's on that upward trajectory. Again, the 1990s, you had Division I guys coming off the bench. So it's hard to compare eras, and it's hard to, I don't like getting into the habit of comparing one era to another, but I would say right now, a crucial component of it all, Dex, is the fact that these kids are staying home, they're getting the right recruiting, they're getting in the right events, they're getting maximized visibility, and the CHSAA and the PSAL is looking pretty prominent. So I don't want to go and say, New York is the Mecca, it's the best basketball state. I don't want to just put that kind of pressure on any of these kids, but I will say that in the last few years, it has reemerged into that, what it once was. And, right now is a very promising time for a lot of these kids.
All right, that's good, because if you don't know, you don't watch high school basketball, you heard Zach just say it, it's a very promising time for these kids. And I want to talk to you about a couple of players because you mentioned a couple of them that are really electrifying in the city right now. You've got Bronx native Ian Jackson, a.k.a. Captain Jack, who plays for, I'll say, for Lutheran. I saw him play as a sophomore.
Yes.
And
at Cardinal Hayes High School.
At Cardinal Hayes.
Toby Awaka.
Yep. Saw him there, and I watched him there as a sophomore.
Yeah.
Really dynamic five-star guard, right?
Yeah.
At one point, Rivals, who you write for, they had him ranked as the #1 2024 player in the nation.
Absolutely.
What do you think of the University of North Carolina commits game, and how good do you think he could be on the next level?
Ian Jackson, I think, has what a lot of these kids lack today, and that's an assailant's instincts. I mean, he takes over games with his scoring. He's improved in every component of his game. Again, one of the knocks on him early on in his career was that he wasn't a knockdown shooter. You know, again, New York, there's been a stigma about New Yorkers that they're these flashy, you know, crafty, you know, dynamic players, but they aren't always the best shooters. I think Ian Jackson has perfected that component of his game, and he's made it a crazy part of his workload to get in the gym and fire up a fusillade of shots. As you see now, he can hit transition threes. He can reel off consecutive threes in a hurry. He's improved. He's the true portent of a good player, I think, Dex, is when you can take that one perceived weakness of your game and convert it into a strength, and that's what he's done. And you see last year at Cardinal Hayes, alongside Elijah Moore, he had multiple games of 4+ three-pointers. You know, he hit threes from the parking lot. He's got NBA range. So, I mean, there's really no evident visible flaw in his game right now. And the fact that he plays so hard, tracking down rebounds and just extraterrestrial athleticism, I think that his game is tailor cut for that next level. I don't have the expertise with the NBA, with, you know, scouting and all that, but I wouldn't say him being a one and done is far-fetched. But again, I can't gauge that right now. But I think he's going to translate instantly just because of his prolific scoring ability and because of the ability to impact multiple categories. You know, he's a very good ball handler. He's really able to get into the nooks and crannies of defense as a scorer. He's tremendous, absolutely dynamic open court finisher.
Yeah, very dynamic.
Yeah, it just jumps out of the gym. And you see how hard he plays. Even in the Slam Volume 5 this summer at Rucker Park, you saw that literally he's an every possession guy. And he's playing as if a national championship is at stake. A lot of guys are going to – it's an all-star game, man. Come on, man. Who's going to take it that serious?
But he's playing hard. He's out here playing hard.
He's got a relentlessness to him, and he's got a motor and an engine and just an insatiable drive to him that I think puts him in that category of elite. And, you know, I'm super excited for the kid, and I think that he's going to have a very – again, there's a lot of history. Kenny Smith went to North Carolina.
Yep.
R.J. Davis out of Stepinac High School. I saw him out in Florida when he was a freshman. And – look at what he's done there. So, I mean, there is a history of New Yorkers going, and then Hubert Davis had that big role with 94 Knicks.
Right.
Knockdown shooter.
There's a history with that New York and North Carolina connection.
There's definitely an intriguing connection there. And like I said, I think that based on just the intangibles that he brings, just so gung-ho, and now that he's made just 3-level scoring, his aptitude, I think, is unrivaled, unparalleled in the city. And, you know, it's funny to think how good Hayes would be this year if he stayed. If
he was still there,
if
right.
Elijah stayed, and if Steven Solano was 7-footer who had a breakout summer playing AAU, you know, 6'10", 6'11", 7 foot, jumps out of the gym. He had games of 12 blocks this summer, Dex, and now he's out in La Lumiere in Indiana, a traditional powerhouse. They're trying to rework their national team to where they once were. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent all across the boards if you think about it.
No,
and it's come in a hurry.
It's right. There's no doubt about this. And for folks, you can check out Ian Jackson highlights. Amazing, as you heard from Zach, can jump out the roof. The shooting got better. You're right. I've seen that improvement from his sophomore year.
And he's got a quick shot release too.
He's got a very quick shot release. He's fluid. He's confident in it too. But I have to ask you this, because you can't talk about excitement around NYC hoops without talking about Stepinac's Boogie Fland right now. Boogie, another 5-star guard. He's headed to Kentucky next year. So I got to ask you this, Zach. What do you like about the Bronx natives' play on the court? What do you like about Boogie's game?
I like his flair for the end game is what I like, Dex. If you think about it, he's had so many big games. He's had so many games on big stages where he's just come into a different stratosphere and just taken over. You look at last year's city championship. He hit 7 of his first 7 shots and just plays with that killer instinct. You saw it the other night against St. Ray's. He had that big play down the stretch where he literally just drove in from the three-point line and just finished a crafty move in traffic. I mean, slick, shifty, and he's another guy, like Ian, there were some questions enveloping how well he could shoot that 3 ball. And I'll tell you when it occurred. It occurred that summer, Dex, when he was playing with the PSA Cardinals. Shout out to Munch Williams, one of the best coaches, mentors. And I don't know if you've read his book. It's a great book. And, I'm getting off track here, man. My ADHD is kicking in. You gotta give me a trank real quick. But what I'm trying to tell you is that summer is when he really elevated into that elite level player. Remember, he had offers as a freshman. He scored 1,000 points, Dex, while playing at a COVID truncated. It's only like 5 or 6 games. So that's a special, unique talent. But I think when he got into that upper tier category was that summer playing for the PSA Cardinals on the AAU circuit. He had a game where he was 8 for 10. 5 for 7 from three-point territory during a 53-50 win over Bab C. And from there, his shooting took off. I mean, he had games of, again, like Ian, spreading the floor out, spacing them out, and just hitting big, timely, opportunistic three-pointers. So I think that was a big jump for him. And the same thing happened with R.J. Davis. R.J. Davis, when I saw him out in Florida, he was a small, tiny, underdeveloped kid. His game grew so much there at Stepinac, and he just developed that killer instinct, that assailant's instinct to hit those big shots, to take it upon himself, to call his own number. So I think that Boogie Fland has his skill set is off the charts.
Nah, no doubt about it. He's been very impressive. I watched his game the other day.
For sure.
Against St. Ray's, very impressive there too. When you talk about, those two players, Ian Jackson, Boogie as well, they squared off in the Catholic League Championship.
Oh, they've had their battles over the years. They've had some chess matches over the year. Make no mistake about it. They go at it.
We saw that last year, right? But Fland's Stepinac team, that squad came out on top.
Yeah. And they avenged the loss in which they were down by 20 points at one point.
Right.
Archdiocese.
And so huge win, huge ability for them to capture the championship. This year in the Catholic League, CHSAA.
Yeah.
How are things looking? Do you look at the Crusaders as the team that's poised to repeat?
The one thing I can tell you about that team, Dex, is that they have so much layered depth across. I mean, you got Danny Carbuccia, Big East recruit, alongside Fland. And a lot of people don't know this, but he started as a freshman when Fland was on the shelf for half that semester with an injury. And, dynamic player, tremendous dribble drive penetration, really adept passer, really sees the floor well, where he's a heady facilitator. But all across the boards on that team, they have talent. Josiah Jervis, I believe he's a sophomore, 2020. Yeah, I believe he's a sophomore. And then they got Hassan Koriesi, who had a great game the other night. They just have so many weapons. They have seasoned seniors coming off the bench. And, I mean, it's almost like one of those traditional prep basketball teams where you can play 12 to 13 guys comfortably, which you don't see in high school.
You don't see that a lot.
High school, you see thin 6-7 rotations, teams that are not very deep, especially in New York. But, they have Pat Massaroni has done a great job building that program into a national contender. And, you like them to I like them. I wouldn't see. Here's the thing. It's so evenly matched up at the top with the way Christ the King is playing right now. And the way St. Ray's is playing right now.
Do you think either of those teams could beat them?
I think it can go either way.
Oh, wow.
I can go either way. I think that it's going to be similar to it's going to be similar to last year, where any one of in those upper stratum teams could beat each other. And that's how you had Cardinal Hayes, just obliterating them, and then Stepinac coming back and beating them in the city championship. I think that's what makes that league special, is there's so much talent across the boards. And it goes back to what we were talking about kids staying put, kids not getting wooed by prep schools and traditional powerhouse programs, and staying put, and the talent just intensifying. So, Christ the King has a great team this year.
Yeah,
big, bullish, 6'6" scorer in Dwayne Pierce.
Yep.
Joe Arbitello told me the other day that he's having one of the best senior years that he's seen in 16 years over there.
That says a lot.
The kid really can do it all. He can shoot. He really hits highly contested, tough, difficult shots. And King Fang is having a great year. I think he had 30 out in that tournament earlier, and he's playing. He's a lob finisher, Dex. He's playing around the rim, hungry. He's got that bird's eye view of the rim like Dirk Nowitzki, where he can just he's difficult to guard at his size, at 6'10", being a floor spreader.
I like hearing this because it lets you know that things can be wide open in CHSAA. Moving along, I got to ask you this, because this has been a hot topic.
Sorry, I know I
week.
tend to over-answer your question.
No, it's fine. You're giving people the information they need to know. But I got to ask you about this, because this has become a hot topic this week.
Sure.
Because Sebastian Telfair appeared on It Is What It Is. That's a show with Cameron and Mace, and he had some comments about who's the best high school basketball player of all time. Now, you and I, we both have roots in covering the PSAL.
Yeah.
I got to ask you this, because somebody...
I'm going to cut you off.
Go ahead.
I still listen to Harlem World every day.
That's still Harlem World.
I'm an old school guy. I've never really evolved from my roots, but I still it's one of my favorite albums.
Nah, it's one of my,
I still listen to the Ooh Mace, I love you. So. Yeah, I mean that's a chick song, but I got to be honest, man. Every song of that what was it? 98 that came out.
98 that came out. You're taking it back.
Still playing that every day.
We're showing our age here with the Mace Harlem World reference. But I got to ask you this: as you and I, both guys who've covered the PSAL,
absolutely,
you've seen some great players.
Absolutely.
Who is the best PSAL player that you have ever seen? Because I got to throw you into this debate right now. Who's the best PSAL player that you have seen with your two eyes play the sport of basketball?
Well, honestly, as we just said, I'm an older dude, so I take you back a few years, a few decades. I think Lance Stevenson, come out of Lincoln, that was PSAL, right?
That was PSAL. Yeah, you're right.
Just being that type of player that can generate points in so many ways, and him being a big guard too, when that was starting to evolutionize. He's a really heady passer and just all-around talent that can pile up points in a hurry, that can make players better. It just had that, coursing through his bloodstream, that will to win, that desire to be great. And obviously, his father Stretch was pushing him. A lot of people were in his corner. And it got a little controversial at one point with everything surrounding him. It was a lot of pressure riding on a teenager's shoulders. But he's one of the most acrobatic talents I think I've ever seen at the high school level. College-ready build as a teenager. So much pressure on him, and he delivered. Yeah. So, they called him Born Ready, and that's a difficult nickname to live up to. But I thought, by all accounts and measures, the years he had, he was one of the best players to ever come out of New York City, and he brought that type of game-changing, run-triggering play every time he stepped on the floor.
No, he did. He played hard.
Yep.
One of the best that I got to cover, too, as well. Got to see all four of his PSAL city titles that he won 4 straight. 4 years, 4 PSAL titles. One of the best that I've seen and got to cover. Pleasure covering. Shout out to Lance Stevenson out there.
And what he's done, Dex, the career longevity he's had is really impressive. And you don't see that every day.
Right. When you talk about just not what he did in the high school level, obviously playing at Cincinnati and then in the league, obviously with the Pacers, a long career he had.
And at Cincinnati, I think he had to adjust his game a little bit to not being so ball dominant. But I think that was where he was able to show his dexterity and his skill set as a passer. And, he had a lot of games where he had just made great reads. Yancey Gates, he had a good surrounding cast. A lot of people forget this, but Sean Kilpatrick was there with him. And that's another guy wasn't highly recruited. He went to prep school for a year and then wound up making a pretty good name for himself and really, I remember he played at White Plains High School under Spencer Mayfield, and he's another guy, came up without the same hype and hearsay and fanfare as Lance, but really had a good career for himself.
Yeah, he did, and he made a name for himself too on the AAU.
And he's done really well with his businesses. I know he's got a juice bar and he's got a couple other investments and all that. Okay. Yeah, you didn't know. Yeah, so he's done very well. Just a great kid coming out of that system. He was on a pretty good high school team. Usually Mount Vernon was the lay of the land there. Prior to that, that was when John Mitchell, shout out to Jay Mitch, he was player of the year. Michael Colburn.
Yep, I remember covering as well too.
Michael Colburn played as an 8th grader actually. That was Chris Lowe. They had so much talent. So Mount Vernon was kind of the class of that area. And then along came that White Plains team. And Sean Kilpatrick had a tremendous impact.
Tremendous impact. Shout out to Sean Kilpatrick too. I want to ask you this about getting back to current, because we took it back. Man. We took it back a little bit.
I'm telling you, the ADHD. I didn't take my meds this morning, man. You guys got to trank me up. Take me back.
You're good.
Sorry.
We got to talk about name, image, and likeness, because you hear a lot of that around the college game, Zach. But we've seen high school players be able to secure NIL deals where they can get paid, help themselves, their families. What do you think about NIL and its impact on NYC high school ballers?
100%, Dex. I think it's been long time coming. These kids need to be compensated for their work. And it gets nauseating when you think of other people profiting off them when they should be profiting off of it. So I think it's a great concept that's really growing and starting to flourish, and it's really giving them a great opportunity to understand not only the value of money, but how to invest that money and save that money and take care of themselves for the rest of their lives. That's something you learn in college, is how to save that money. I think that it does get a little bit confusing with how it affects the collegiate level, because there are recruiting advantages that I think bigger schools receive because of their NIL. Donors, all that stuff is a huge concept in it all. So I'm 100% for it. I agree with it. I think it's a tremendous concept, and I think it's a long time coming. I've always been an advocate that student athletes should get paid, and they should not have other people profit off their workload. So I'm 100% in favor of it. I got nothing but good things to say about it, and I've got nothing but respect and appreciation for these kids that go out and, when you're grinding at 5 a.m., getting 1,000 shots up on the Vertimax, doing wind sprints, you should be paid for that, and again, it's a results-driven business. Absolutely. Like anything.
Right.
So I'm 100%. However, I do think it gives some of the bigger schools an upper hand on some of the schools that don't have that financial background, don't have that, and I think it's played a huge role into the transfer portal.
Right.
As you see.
Right. You're seeing in high school kids switching schools, and you're right. It becomes almost the haves and the have-nots.
Exactly.
In terms of that. It's always interesting. Last thing for me, Zach.
Yep.
Before we get you out of here. I know you said this at the top, you believe that we're in sort of a renaissance with NYC high school
100%.
hoops, right? You weren't willing to call it the Mecca or say that it's back there yet, but you do see things changing. How do you see high school basketball in our great city growing over the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see this going? Because if it's coming back, do you see it getting back to that point where we're calling it the Mecca again?
Honestly, Dex, I do, just because of how the culture is right now. You got Boogie Fland giving autographs to kids. You got Ian Jackson giving autographs to kids. You have kids snaking around the gym to see them. That's the culture. That's the culture growing. And that's the impact that it's having on kids that now want to replicate the success currently. And if you think about it, the 2026 and 2027 class, there's a lot of freshmen right now playing on these big teams. Anderson Diaz at St. Ray's, he had a great game the other night against Stepinac. Had a big bucket in the fourth quarter, drove into the seams of the defense and laid in a nice lay-in. He can shoot it a little bit. And there's other guys in that class too, all across 2027 and even 2028 now. You're hearing about these kids, and the ranking systems obviously have been important figures in getting these kids out there. But I think because of the culture the last few years, I think this is very sustainable. I don't think there's ever going to be a lull where there was a few years ago, or COVID. Obviously, it could have gone either way. I think with COVID, there was actually, if you look at the number of players that upped their game after COVID. Look at Christ the King. Look at the year they had last year. Brandon Williams going to UCLA. Big point forward, multi-talented. Devin Vanterpool really took over games, gave them a psychological edge. He's now at Florida Atlantic. Shout out to Dusty May. Great coach. I was down there in Boca Raton. Got a chance to see the culture that he was building. And did you project to see them in the Final Four last year or what?
I did not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a Bobby Knight disciple.
Yeah, so you're seeing what's going on with it. I think it's an exciting time, like you said, for New York City high school basketball, and you're seeing that with the prominence of the players. We talked about Ian Jackson, Boogie Fland, the way that they are rising. It's a really exciting time. And listen, you know what's exciting about it, Zach? You get to cover it.
I know. Fortunate. I've been very blessed and fortunate in that regard.
You have to appreciate the blessings when you're able to be around and cover greatness. And, I did a lot of coverage.
Well, it's not like they had a choice. I mean, where else would I be?
That's fair. That's fair. But you're doing such a great job covering it.
Thank you so much. I
for Rivals,
that.
NYCHoops.net. Shout out to Maurice Wingate, Stacey Davis, who do a great job there.
Home team.
NYCHoops.net. Home team over there. Zach, I appreciate you coming by and talking some high school basketball.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great,
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah,
Hopefully we'll have a lot to talk and chop it up about at the end of the season.
Yes.
At the playoffs.
In the playoffs. That's when you got to come back and talk, because that's coming up really soon. We're only about, 6-7 weeks away from that?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting with the high school basketball playoffs coming around in New York City. There'll be a lot to talk about. Check out his work. That is Zach Smart. As I said, NYCHoops.net, Rivals.com. Zach, we'll do this again soon, man.
It was fun, bro. It was fun.
It was fun.
Hope I didn't take up too much of your time and elaborate on too many of the answers.
Hey.
Again, you got to pay me to shut up, man.
Nah, when you get to talk about high school hoops and you also get a Harlem World reference in there, it's all good with me.
Absolutely.
It's all good. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate you, man.
Hey, Dex, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Anytime. All right, it was good to get back to my roots and talk some high school hoops. Special thanks to my guest, Zach Smart. And I want to give a huge shout out to Kim Mejia, a.k.a. Courtside Kim. She hooked us up with the great footage that you saw on this week's episode. Was courtesy of her. She's one of the great videographers around NYC high school basketball. She's going to be a future guest on this show for sure. Thank you, Kim. Always major thanks to my producer, Lee Insler, editors Antonio Oliveras, Nicole, Kim Highland, and Nick, director Brianna Mutsin-Dashiaka. It is time to bounce on this edition of New York Got Game. We will see you next week.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.